What is going on? What hath God wrought? I don't know if I'm live or not. Let's see if I can get back into Zoom and find out what the crud is going on. Okay. Am I live? Yes, I'm live. Okay. I apologize for the technical difficulties. This has not been my best week. Um, I've been just dealing with trying to get a lot organized personally. I've had some medical stuff going on, good medical stuff, but still medical stuff. And yeah, it's been a little bit of a ride. Um, I don't expect that anyone will tune in because I don't usually live stream on Friday. This video is mostly existing to correct some mistakes that I made in yesterday's video because I made the true rookie mistake of not making sure that I had all of my facts in order before I started streaming because somehow in my tiny little brain, I had gotten the Assyrian Church of the East or the Apostolic Assyrian Church mixed up with the Armenian Apostolic Church. They are both very different organizations. They have different histories, they have different languages, they have different liturgies, they have different Christologies. And I would like to humbly apologize for um, showing the depressing Roman Catholic tendency to look at all of the guys in the cool hoods and the amazing Eastern drip and just go, okay, well, they're not, are they Greek Orthodox? No. Okay, are they Catholic? No. What are they? It all kind of blurs together. That was a mistake and I apologize. So what I am going to do now is I am going to just redo the episode. We are memory holing it. We are pretending it does not exist. And I'm going to record this video and eventually this. So just view the first one as a bad first draft. This is the better second draft. And then it's going to actually get cleaned up and published. So, oh, it looks like somebody might actually be here. So if you are here, just drop a quick comment in the chat just so I know if I'm talking to myself or not. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I am going to talk about what's going on with regard to the Armenian Apostolic Church and the fact that one of their Catholicos is calling for Vatican III and what that might mean. So I am going to hit record. Where's record? Oh, there's record. Okay, I'm going to hit record and I'm going to start going. Hi, Katie from Nerd Church here. And this is the what's meant to be the second episode in the ongoing series called SSPX WTF, that is taking us forward to the coming July 1st schism and the consecrations that are going to be coming as a that are going to be coming with that schism. The second half of today's episode is going to go back to the SSPX and Sedevacantist team up video that we were looking at in our last episode to kind of get into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts about what's going on with Sedevacantism, what's going on with the SSPX, how do they fit together, what does this mean? However, over the course of the last couple weeks, something very interesting has happened. And that thing is that there are once again starting to be rumblings that some of the Oriental Orthodox churches are considering joining back up with the Catholic Church. I had heard a reference to this a few weeks ago, talking about the I'm sorry, I'm getting a message and okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop the recording and then restart. I apologize. Okay, I apologize. I'm sorry. This is not a professional operation today, apparently. Okay. Katie from Nerd Church here. Today I'm doing a little bit of an extra live stream. I had intended to talk about some interesting developments involving the Oriental Orthodox churches and the way that they might fit in to the coming SSPX schism, which is still scheduled for July 1st. They have a nice little website and everything. But today I wanted to take a step back from that because we have right now a parallel development going on that has the potential to significantly impact the way that Pope Leo might be approaching the SSPX schism. And by this, of course, I want to highlight, particularly since the trads have picked up on this, and by the trads, I mean the traditional Catholics who are at least sympathetic to the SSPX. Again, if you don't know who the SSPX is, please just stop now, go back, watch the first video on the SSPX. And you'll know who they are and what's going on with them. So the point is, they're planning on going into schism on July 1st of 2026. Now, a lot of people think that Pope Leo should not let them do that. However, one of the other factors is that at the same time that the SSPX is threatening to go into schism, the Oriental Orthodox churches are starting to talk about unity. So let's review quickly who the Oriental Orthodox churches are. They are the Armenian Apostolic Church. They are the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, the Coptic Orthodox Church, the Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church, the Syriac Orthodox Church, and the Eritrean Orthodox Church. I'm sorry, the Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church. So these are Christian groups that have, these are Christian groups that are descended, or at least claim descent, from churches that were founded by the apostles in this kind of first wave of Christian expansion. So we're talking about groups in India, we're talking about groups in the Middle East, although not notably the Assyrian Church of the East, which is a separate group which technically went into schism from the Chaldean Catholic Church in the 17th century. Basically, part of the Assyrian Church united with the Catholic Church, and part of them stayed separate. That's the Assyrian Church of the East. They are not connected with the Oriental Orthodox churches. However, both groups have been sort of indicating that they might be willing to talk with Pope Leo about possibly getting the band back together, or indeed, in some cases, adding new members to the band, because we're talking about churches who, they may have sent representatives to the Council of Nicaea, they might have sent representatives to the Council of Chalcedon, to Ephesus, some of the very early councils. And I'm checking my dates here because I made a mistake and I didn't do that. Yeah, so basically all of these are groups that became independent, who became independent from either the Orthodox Church or the Catholic Church way before the Great Schism. So these are guys who have always, to some degree, been not in communion with Rome. So when they're talking about getting in communion, this is something that's going to be very appealing to Leo. So without further ado, I'm just going to show you some videos, and I'm just going to provide some, and again, I'm just providing footnotes. I'm just providing context and explanation to help people understand why it is that Pope Leo might not care about losing 500,000, 2 million Catholics who are not even willing to come to the table and sit down with him and have a conversation about doctrine. Who, when Duco Fernandez, Grand Inquisitor, always in my heart, the head of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, was like, okay, you have to sit down and talk to us. We have to do, you have to sit down and talk to us. We have to do business. And they said no. And the gentleman who I'm about to show you was someone who was saying yes. And this is interesting. And I think you'll see why it's particularly interesting when I get to the part where Anthony Stein, so my goodness gracious. When we get to the part where Anthony Stein, our well-known friend of the channel, starts making noise about how this is a really terrible and ridiculous thing. And somehow I am watching myself, and that's not cool. Okay, so okay, I think the only person watching was me. But that's okay, because I am doing this out of what? Catholic guilt. Why? Because Catholic guilt is the best guilt. It's Catholic guilt is the guilt that makes you be better. Okay, so again, I'm just going to watch. Now, I want to show you this because this is this is an official Vatican thing,
His
right?
Holiness Aram I, head of the Armenian Apostolic Church in Lebanon, has renewed his appeals to the Vatican for another ecumenical council to be convened.
Now, note, he is the head of the Armenian Apostolic Church in Lebanon. The head of the actual Armenian Apostolic Church is the Catholicos Patriarch, who lives in Armenia. However, due to the unique way that the Oriental Orthodox churches arrange themselves, he, as the head in Lebanon, is second only to the person who is sometimes referred to as the Armenian Pope, right? So this gentleman is equivalent to so Mar Aram is equivalent to basically a cardinal archbishop in the Catholic Church, except that he's like not a full step below his patriarch. He's like a quarter step below his patriarch. So he's someone who can meet with Pope Leo on a level of more or less equality. And that's kind of the picture that we're seeing here, right? Like they have similar, and again, I know that this is like talking like total weird nitpicky conspiracy brain, but I think that it's important to realize that when we're talking about the Catholic Church, when we're talking about religion, in these liturgical traditions, that clothing matters, symbols matter. So the fact that they are both wearing their best, like semi-formal outfits, and they are looking at each other and they are conversing as friends, as brothers. I'm in my best clothes. I'm in my good clothes. You're in your good clothes. We're talking. That's important symbolically. So let's just keep going. Also, again, just take a moment to appreciate the like really luxe vestments.
In short, Vatican III. He admitted as much during a recent press conference with journalists in Rome, saying he has raised this appeal several times in the past.
That I have raised this question with the former three popes, and none of these popes.
Okay, so when he's saying former three popes, he's talking about Francis, Benedict XVI, and John Paul II. So he is talking about, so like this is an old man who has been working on this for a very long time. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is because this is not the kind of guy who is going to be shooting his mouth off. This is not the kind of guy who is going to be saying things that Leo does not want him to say, or at least that would blow up the situation with Pope Leo and with the Catholic Church. Because remember, this he's on his fourth pope. And who knows? He might see a fifth pope. It's not impossible. I hope he doesn't, but you never know. So the point is that the fact that he's saying, I want there to be a Vatican III, you name the day, you name the place, I will be there. That's important. That's really important. Oh, also, just by the way, can we please take a moment to like appreciate the way that light shines off of moire silk. Moire refers to the specific pattern. It's just like I'm sorry. I'm fascinated by clothing as a way that humans use to communicate, and also just, it's fun.
Said no, but they shared or they expressed their uh, their arguments, their concerns. For instance, you see, they said that the decisions of the Vatican II have not yet been fully implemented.
The Armenian Patriarch then acknowledged the need for patience as Rome continues to fully integrate Vatican II into the Church. But he also
The black and white footage that was just shown was basically from one of the early meetings that happened around the time of Vatican II, which was when the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Oriental Orthodox churches, as well as like the Assyrian Church of the East also went and, kind of sat down and started to really work on ecumenical dialogue with the Roman Catholic Church. Well, actually, not with the Roman Catholic Church, with the Catholic Church in general.
urged the need for a new council to address the radical changes that have occurred since the last council closed in 1965.
I'm not the one to speak for the Catholic Church, but in my opinion, that we are living in a different world. There are lots of issues and challenges, the trends, tendencies that really question the mission of the church, the Christian values, the credibility of our church.
The greatest challenges today have
Okay, so, and again, it's important to note that in 1994, the or the yeah, sorry, the Apostolic Assyrian Church, or also known as the Assyrian Church of the East, sat down with then Pope John Paul II and came up with a common Christological declaration. And now they're actually diaphysites, but kind of like diaphysites with like extra steps. Diaphysite is basically the idea that Jesus has a divine nature and Jesus has a human nature, and, and that those are united within one person. This is different than Miaphysitism, which says that God has a divine nature and a human nature, and those two natures are inseparably combined into one single entity. It's very technical. You have to, I don't know enough Plato to really like feel like I kind of understand the details. At this point in my life, I've just kind of memorized the technical distinctions and just have to hope that I don't fall into a formal heresy. Because, yeah, it's tough. It's kind of tough. Um, but but the point is they actually have sat down and come up with common Christological declarations for some of the Miaphysite Oriental Orthodox churches as well. So basically, what they've decided is that, sort of informally, as long as you believe that Christ had a fully human nature and a fully divine nature, that whatever intellectual model you get for how those natures relate to each other, as long as you believe that Jesus is fully human and fully divine, that's what matters. And that sort of flexible attitude, because again, he's saying what Mararam is arguing essentially is that, we started beefing in like the 4th, 5th century. That's a long time ago. And we've got bigger fish to fry because right now we've got people building like robots that are supposed to act like humans. Maybe that's more important.
Of course, to do with the birth of the digital age and the rise of artificial intelligence, which has quickly come to dominate almost every sphere of human life, offering promise and peril, and raising questions, says Aram I, that should concern all Christians, both Western and Eastern.
Even, you see, today, if Vatican Council III organized, all the churches, in a sense, will participate, because we cannot say anymore in this globalized world that your problem is not my problem.
In other words, the issues of the 21st century demand unity in the church, even between Rome and the Armenian church.
Now, this is showing Leo coming to Lebanon and being met with some prelates. The kids, of course, are giving him bread and salt, which is incredibly significant culturally. Basically, by doing that, symbolically, they're saying, this man is our guest, and no one is allowed to hurt him or mess with him because he's our guest. It's very old. It's very ceremonial. Does it really mean anything? Maybe, maybe not. But it's the kind of things that humans do when you need to make sure that all the gestures are right. Also, again, let's just appreciate the beautiful red rosetta, the like lovely, truly lovely embroidery on that man's garment,
which split following the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Patriarch Aram also disclosed additional topics discussed with Pope Leo and other Vatican officials, topics which included finding a common date for celebrating Easter and challenges facing Christians in the Middle East.
Okay, I'm going to pause here just because I want us to pause on the Pope in his full formal Pope suit, which is what we call it when he has the mozzetta and he's got his stole on. Aram is wearing a really lovely brocaded coat or mantle. I'm sure it has a proper name. I don't know what that name is. Now, when they're bringing up the date for Easter, and I'm going to stop, I'm going to let this play out because it's almost done. Okay. So when we are talking about, now I'm going to go to Return to Tradition and let Anthony Stein tell us how the world is terrible. But before I do that, I want to talk about the common date for Easter issue. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a second. Okay. The common date for Easter is something that's been a little bit, excuse me, I have to plug my computer in, is something that has been an issue for both the for basically the Eastern churches and the Western churches for a long time. The date for Easter is, the issue with the date for Easter is that everybody, anybody who's Catholic and watching, say it with me. Easter is the first full moon after, Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. So that's how we calculate the date of Easter. Now, in the Eastern churches, they add a second, they add another requirement, which is, excuse me, the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox and Passover. The reason why and Passover got added had a lot to do with the presence of a lot of, and again, we're talking like third, fourth, fifth century here, very, very early, at the point where there were still people who had been Jewish and had converted to Christianity at a point when that basically just meant accepting Jesus as the Messiah. And a lot of those people continued to engage in Jewish religious practice for quite some time. So there was an issue of, do we want to have Easter as being completely separate from Passover, or is it okay if they overlap sometimes? The Eastern answer was to say no. The Western answer was to say we don't care if they overlap sometimes, which means that there are some years where Eastern Easter is after Western Easter, simply because sometimes Passover falls on Good Friday. In the modern world, Passover falls on Good Friday is not something that particularly matters. It's worth noting that back in the day, sometimes when Passover fell on Good Friday, there would be riots and there would be pogroms and people would die. So maybe it's not a good idea to have Good Friday and Passover coincide. I don't know. It's above my pay grade. But the point is that they're talking about, okay, can we establish a common date for Easter? Maybe. I don't know. But everybody thinks it's really cool when we have one. So the common date for Easter, that's a big one. They decided that the Miaphysite versus Diaphysite controversy doesn't matter that much as long as you believe that God has two natures. I mean, who knows what Vatican III could put on the table? Because, and I don't want to go too far into La La Land speculation here, but it's worth considering that the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has a larger canon, and that canon includes things like the Book of Enoch. Enoch is interesting because Enoch actually gets name checked in the Epistle of James. So, like, what I'm saying is that if Vatican III happens, things are going to be really, really interesting. So while arguably the Vatican is going, yo, we might get the band back together, the people who are sympathetic to the SSPX, and again, basically the SSPX, their argument is we want a Latin Mass and we do not want Catholic doctrine to change if it is changing in the direction of ecumenical dialogue and basically getting the band back together, dealing with people in a more humane way. These are all things that they're not interested in. So without further ado, I am going to just go back into screen sharing so we can see what Anthony Stein has to say about that.
What if I told you there were high-ranking meetings going on in Rome about the convening of a Third Vatican Council? And they've been very, very quiet about this. But one of the participants accidentally published that this was what they're talked about.
Okay, again. And I have a certain amount of respect for Anthony Stein as someone who generally tries to do a good job of accurately portraying what's going on in the Catholic Church at the current time. Although, yes, obviously he's doing it from a very traditional Catholic, I love the Latin Mass, I hate change point of view. However, he also has a tendency to be a little bit disingenuous and a tendency, and has a strong tendency to create scandal and stir up doubts, let's say, about what's going on in the Vatican on a fairly regular basis. And this again is part of that, because Mara Ram wasn't hiding, he wasn't whispering, he gave a press conference. And not everybody picked up on what he said at his press conference quite as much. But let's continue.
And it comes from unimpeachably mainstream sources. You can't deny this. However, we'll start with Mr. John Henry Weston, whom I have a high regard for, but I know many of you don't. He published this to X, and then he provided the receipts. Now, this is very interesting. Why did a Vatican press release about Leo XIV's meeting with the head of the Armenian?
Yeah, John Henry Weston, one of my 3 least favorite Canadians. Because again, he is someone who has published this "I'm just asking questions here" letter, in which he called for the College of Cardinals to consider the possibility of deposing Pope Leo and putting in a new guy of whom John Henry Weston would approve, rather. He is backing the SSPX. He wants a schism.
Armenian Apostolic Church, Aram I, on Monday, May 18th, 2026, leave out their discussion about a third Vatican Council. You can see that was one of the main discussion points from the Armenian leader's press release, but the Vatican one leaves it out entirely. They said to be published this about 36 hours ago at the time I'm recording this. That article has not happened yet, which is fine, because he provided the links for the Vatican press release and the one from the Armenians. Let's start with the Vatican press release. Meeting of the Holy Father Leo XIV with His Holiness Aram I, Catholicos of the Armenian Apostolic Church, See of Sicilia, Lebanon, on May 18th, 2026. I'm just going to read you the executive summary here, because then it goes into a actual address that Leo gives. I read through this. No mention of Vatican III, but here, this is the executive summary. This morning, the Holy Father, Leo XIV, received an audience His Holiness Aram I, Catholicos of the Armenian Apostolic Church, See of Cilicia, Lebanon. During the meeting, after the private meeting and the presentation of the delegation, His Holiness Aram I and Pope Leo XIV delivered their respective addresses, followed by the exchange of gifts. Finally, there was a moment of communal prayer in Urban VIII Chapel of the Vatican Apostolic Palace, and then it gives you the address by Pope Leo to Aram I, and it mentions Vatican II and the Joint International Commission for Theological Debate between the Catholic Church and the Oriental Orthodox churches. What it doesn't make any reference to is Vatican III. Okay, so it didn't happen.
Possibly a reason for that is because it wasn't said. It was said in the private meeting. Because all they did was note that the private meeting happened. They didn't say what was discussed. And that's actually pretty typical of the Vatican. They tend to, whatever the public statements are, come out in public. But then whatever it is that is said in private conversation is generally held in reasonable confidence, although the people who attend are always free to talk about what they said. in that sense, we might even say that maybe they're looking at it, kind of in the way that just out of pure habit, a Roman Catholic priest is going to approach the seal of the confessional. They had a private conversation. That doesn't need to be spread around by the Pope. Because if the person he had that conversation with wants to talk about it, they can and they will.
Right, well, hold on, because this is the website of the Armenian Orthodox Church with a picture of Pope Leo and Ron I. Meeting between His Holiness Ron I and His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, dated the 19th of May. I'll read you this full thing. On May 18th, 2026, His Holiness Catholicos Ron I and His Holiness Pope Leo XIV held a private meeting at the Vatican. During the meeting, His Holiness Catholicos Ron I addressed several matters of significant importance. The establishment of a...
Yeah. Now, it's also worth pointing out that for the Armenian Apostolic Church, especially the Armenian, especially with regard to the Armenian diaspora, they've been through a lot of stuff, including the Armenian genocide. So that's part of where the unified date for Easter and the designation of a commemorative day for all martyrs. Because when we're talking about like, for example, the Coptic Church, there are Coptic martyrs who have been killed in the 21st century. So that's big. And again, he's talking about what's important to him from his point of view. That is his right as the Catholicos, right? So again, he's saying what he thinks needs to be said in public. Leo's saying what Leo thinks needs to be said in public. This isn't a conspiracy because neither one of these guys are the kind of people that are going to run around like crazy shooting their mouth off. That's why Leo needs people like me, because I will run around and shoot my mouth off and try to make sure that people see the reality of the situation and really understand the fine nuances of what's going on. Because these guys don't need to speculate about what happens in the room. They're in the room when it happens.
Unified date for Easter, the designation of a commemorative day for all martyrs, and the convening of a Third Vatican Council. He underscored the urgent necessity of these issues within the context of the universal Christian church. End quote. Now, one of them, now you could say, well, the Armenian Orthodox Church is schismatic, and so they're lying. That's would be silly. Yeah, they are in schism from...
Yeah, that is silly.
But true ecumenical dialogue is, with true, totally right and just ecumenical dialogue, involves healing the East-West schism, right?
Yeah.
The Vatican's press release makes no mention of this at all. This Third Vatican Council, which is more likely. They decided to keep the details on the down low, as the kids say, or they decided, or that the Orthodox are lying. Which one is it? I don't think the Orthodox are lying.
Yeah, again, the Vatican released a, accurate and slightly less detailed statement about the about a meeting that happened between Leo and Aram. That was it. It's not a conspiracy. But the thing is that in order to use this as a way of justifying the SSPX schism, he's trying to turn this into a conspiracy because he's trying to turn this into, oh, the Vatican is hiding, the Vatican is plotting, the Vatican is sinister, when the reality is that we're looking at a situation where you have a group that claims to be within the Roman Catholic Church, the Society of St. Pius X, that is disobeying the Pope and is going into schism and are not willing to come to the table. Then you have the Oriental Orthodox churches who are in schism because they inherited a schism. They were born into a schism. And they're interested in coming to the table and fixing that. So the logical conclusion is that at this current moment, in this year of grace, 2026, that the Vatican has decided that schism is more important than anything else, and that unity is something that you can cut a deal on. But if somebody just says, la, 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 I'm not in schism, you can't make me be in schism, I do not recognize your authority to put me in schism, that, Leo might just go, okay, fine. I'm excommunicating you. If you don't want to acknowledge that you are excommunicated, I can't force you.
We have no indication of what Rome's response to this was. It's my assertion that the Synod on Synodality has been an exercise in having a titanic sea change in the church, akin to that which was unleashed by Vatican II, without having it be a council, and to do it for a number of reasons. One, if they actually hold a council, the opposition to it would be much more organized than it was 60 years ago.
Which actually brings up a really good point, because he's right. I mean, like there is, and I've said this facetiously before, that ultimately, like, the best argument for having Vatican III is that the only thing that will shut anybody up about Vatican II is having Vatican III to complain about. But it also does bring up a point, because yes, there are people that if the Oriental Orthodox and the Assyrian Apostolic Church of the East and the and the Eastern Orthodox Church and anybody else who wants to come to the party, maybe the Anglicans, maybe some Lutherans, we don't know, if they all want to sit down at the table and have Vatican III, and they're not interested in schism, but who is? The SSPX. The SSPX is not operating from a position of strength.
Two, the modernists and progressives in general have no end state. If you ask them, what are we progressing to? They'll give you vague platitudes, a more just world, etc.
Actually, I'm going to answer, since I am someone who counts myself as a progressive Catholic. This is me looking at the monitor, and I'm going to tell Anthony Stein, this is what the progressives want. We want to help God bring about the kingdom of God. That's what we want. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's what we want. And we understand how big the gulf is between the world that we live in and the world that God wants to exist. And we are trying to bridge that gap with our faith, with our prayer, with our actions, and sometimes with our own bodies. That is what we want. And you're right. There is no end to this progress because where that progress ends up is in the kingdom of God. The difference is we think that God wants us to get off our butts and do some work. We think that God wants us to act in the world. We think that faith without works is dead. So, yeah, that's what progressives want. And no, we're not going to stop fixing the world until the world is fixed and stays fixed. Okay, I'm going to go back into screen sharing.
The entire point of it is revolution without end, change without end, no end state. This is where progressivism and communism generally differ. The progressive is just wrong in thinking that they are different than communists because their end state is communism. But the communist.
Okay. Anthony Stein is operating from a very, very American view of communism. And the American view of communism is that literally, other than hunting, other than actually enslaving the poor, other than like treating the poor as objects to be used and abused and thrown away, anything short of chattel slavery that allows people to be killed at a whim, he is willing to categorize as communism. Because he doesn't know what communism is. All he knows is he doesn't like it because he wants a world in which people like him are in charge forever and nothing ever changes and nothing ever grows and nothing ever exists. He wants the Catholic Church to be a tomb. Progressives know that the tomb is empty.
End state is a dissolution of all government because people have been conditioned to live together in a decentralized way of completely sharing everything and all this other sugar candy mountain fantasy nonsense. But
he just called the kingdom of God nonsense because that's what he's supposed to be praying for. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Anthony Stein just called that nonsense.
Progressives are fully taken by a revolutionary spirit. They want continual change because they will always dig up some new injustice somewhere. That's the synod of synodality.
They will always dig up some new injustice somewhere. Okay, so that means that, yes, because there's never an end to pain. So therefore, there's never a need to stop trying to end pain. And the thing is that Anthony Stein believes that because he believes that abortion should be illegal. He believes in Christian nationalism. He's okay with revolution as long as the goal is to create a perfect, static, unchanging universe that will never exist as anything else. And the progressive Catholic response to that is to say, what you want is the kingdom of God. What we want is to get there.
Pope Francis started talking about the Synod on Synodality in like 2018. It wrapped up in 2024, or so we thought, and then new working groups were announced. And then an end of decade process was announced. And now we know that's going to happen in 2028. And as recent documents have shown, that will not be the end of it either, because they want to continue the synodal process beyond that.
Okay. Just to clarify, the Synod on Synodality, as he said, is something that's been going on since 2018. It was a big meeting. It's like, we're going to get all the bishops together. We're going to get just experts in general. We're going to put them together in working groups where we're going to have them talk to each other, and then they're going to start producing reports. And then once they have reports, we're going to figure out what we're going to do with that. And some of these reports have been pretty revolutionary, I have to say that. For example, Working Group 9 just came out with a document on same-sex relationships, and not just same-sex, but what the Catholic Church likes to call irregular relationships in general. So basically, romantic or sexual relationships that are happening outside of the context of a Catholic marriage. They are doing that because, again, the Catholic Church is a really big ship, and when you're trying to move a really big ship, you have to get it just right. Because again, in the Catholic view, we don't have, like, it's more important to get it right than to get it fast. It's like fast, cheap, or good. Pick two. And the cheapest way to get anybody to do anything is just to persuade them to go along with it. So we decided on good and cheap, not fast.
This. That's the one barrier to Vatican III, more so than the laity, who most of them will just go along to get along with this. The real barrier.
Okay, so again, Anthony Stein is acknowledging that just as the majority of the world's Catholics went along with Vatican II, that the majority of the world's Catholics are going to go along with Vatican III. And in fact, if the Oriental Orthodox churches, if the Assyrian Church, if the Eastern Orthodox, the Anglicans, who knows where this could keep going to? That if that happens, the majority of Catholics wouldn't just accept it, we would be thrilled. Because the idea of the broken pieces of the church coming back together, I mean, like when I think about that, I'm not gonna lie to you, the first thing that pops into my head is like, okay, but if Leo can pull this off, what kind of a title would he get off of that? Because, like, Leo the Great is already taken, right? So he can't be Leo the Great because that's the kind of title that you can get if you are the man who can settle who can settle some schisms.
Is the very concept of a Vatican III, because councils have to end. And if you start having the Orthodox show up, they might start asking uncomfortable questions. The number one barrier to communion between the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church is not papal authority. That's high up there, but it's not the number one thing. And it's not all the councils that happened after they broke off. That's not the number one thing. That's high up there, but it's not. The number one thing, by their own admission, is the Novus Ordo Missae, the new Mass. They have said it very publicly that they.
Okay. Anthony Stein is correct that the Eastern Orthodox Church specifically was extremely opposed to what the Catholic Church did in Vatican II because the Catholic Church changed the language of the liturgy from Latin to the local vernacular, and also just kind of reordered things. It was a really massive reform, and they were not happy about it. And part of the reason why they were not happy about it was because, in the same way that certain Catholic priests appear to be genuinely personally unsure if women can make transubstantiation work, they were kind of worried that massive liturgical reform was going to cause the Catholic Church to not be Catholic anymore. However, those questions have been answered. Now, are there Orthodox people who are not necessarily thrilled with the possibility of reunification with Rome? Yes. Is part of the reason they're not thrilled because there is currently discussion within the Oriental and Eastern Orthodox churches about things like the proper language for the liturgy. Should there be liturgical reform? Those are all hot button issues that because also there's been a perception that the Roman Catholic Church tries to make people Latinize, tries to impose the way that we like to do things on everybody else. And I mean, that has happened in the past. And it's even possible that if the SSPX goes into schism over tradition, that there might be some Eastern Orthodox groups, there might be some Oriental Orthodox groups that kind of end up in this weird schismatic place as well. It could happen. But again, if we're looking at a thing where the church is more united than it has ever been, at that point, the fact that there are a few malcontents who are just going to make themselves and possibly their children miserable, at a certain point, it's like, guys, you've got free will too. You can just submit to Rome, you can join the club, you can hang out, you can just do your thing.
They don't even think it's valid. It's not my opinion on it, but that's the Orthodox opinion. At least their patriarchs would be the ones participating at a Vatican III.
That was a statement made by a previous Eastern Orthodox patriarch. That is not the opinion of the current Eastern Orthodox patriarch, just to be clear.
That's your number one barrier. And if that's their attitude about it, what are the chances they're going to go along with implementing Working Group 9, for example, from the Synod's synodalities, their document on James Martin's stuff, making it normal?
Okay, again, when Anthony Stein says James Martin stuff, he is specifically referring to same-sex couples who are in a loving, committed relationship engaging in activities that involve genital contact. That is what he is talking about. That is what he has a problem with. Because because he is not willing to see change, even though historically the point of view of the Catholic Church is that, yes, sex outside of marriage is a sin. It has not always been a mortal sin in all cases. if it becomes a venial sin, then guess what? Prayer, fasting, doing good works erases your venial sins just as much. And he doesn't want to live in that world because he wants to live in a world where he gets to be bigoted and he gets to hate. And he gets to hate gay people who are having sex. And that's what he's upset about. I assume, well, I won't speculate unkindly.
Or whatever new madness is cooked up by these people. I would be shocked if Leo the 13th ever, or Leo the 14th ever convened a Vatican III. But at the same time, I don't want these people being in charge of a Vatican III, because the other thing about it is, at a Vatican III, these Eastern bishops and Eastern patriarchs could say all these little orthodox things about morality and such. But all these new bishops of Leos, who are all heterodox, all of them, they're all bad to some degree. They'll be the ones making the decisions that are bad.
Okay, keep in mind, according to a proper Catholic understanding, the job of defining what is and is not heresy is the job of the Pope, the head of the WTF, and your local bishop and your local priest. Anthony Stein wants to subvert that order and say that heresy is whatever the Grand Council of Traditional Catholic YouTubers says is heresy.
I think for the Catholic Church. So pray and fast that this Vatican III talk, that the reason they didn't publish anything about it was not because they're trying to hide something, but because they don't want it to happen either. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments.
Okay. So at this point, I am done screen sharing. I hope that this was helpful and useful. And I hope that you will forgive me for having made mistakes and trying to fix those mistakes. So have a